Hi, my name is Gary Buchanan, and I'm the community manager here at BoxCast. Today, we're going to learn about audio reinforcement. So let me show you a few things. Specifically today, we're going to discuss what is gain and volume, and what does it look like on a console, what is the differences and how they're used, and kind of give you help in understanding about what explanations are when it comes to gain and volume. So in the audio world, gain and volume are two different things, but they actually kind of control some of the same aspects, some of the same things inside of an audio environment. Gain, for example, is not volume. And I want you to learn that right now, because as you learn to mix audio, or you begin to teach your volunteers how to mix audio, gain is not volume. Gain does control volume in some regards, but it's not the volume mix. So let's give you a breakdown of what that would look like. Let's start with volume. Volume is the level heard usually in decibels, and that's usually measured after you've done all the processing and mixing that has been done inside of a console or in a live environment. Typically, volume is controlled when you're inside of, say, a room. A good analogy would be like you're in your car and you're listening to something on the radio and you turn up the volume knob. That volume knob is what volume is. It's literally increasing the amount of sound that's coming out of your speakers and into your car. Now, gain is something similar, but gain actually works a little bit differently. Gain is the amount of signal coming into the console before the processing is done. And I like to attribute this something to more like a garden hose, for example. We're going to send water down that garden hose and we're going to turn the water pressure up. That's gain. But if you use the controller knob, such as the nozzle on the end of your hose to spray your garden and grow that beautiful vegetables that you have, that volume is actually right there. That's what that controller would be at the end of your hose. So when we talk about gain and volume, they do work hand in hand, okay? If we were to change gain on a console, we're going to change gain in the volume. So that's why it's really, really important that as you begin to work in an audio world and you begin to make mixes happen, whether it be in a live environment or say perhaps it's in a live streamed environment, you want to make sure you have a proper structure for everything. And we usually start with gain. So now we've got a little bit basic understanding of what volume and gain actually can do. Let's talk about gain structure. See, that's a fancy term. It's a fancy word for just kind of making sure that all of our inputs and all of our mics and all of our instruments that are coming into our console are balanced, okay? It's important to have a proper gain structure, much like a pyramid. You wouldn't take the base of a pyramid and put it at the top because inevitably, if you put the top at the bottom, that pyramid's going to tip over and fall. Same thing in a triangle situation. Here, we want to make sure we have a good base. We want to make sure we have a good level that everything can build off of and then begin to work on. So in a really different environment, whether you're doing live or you're doing production, gain structure is important because it sets up the entire process all the way down from start to finish. Whether that be you get your gain levels here and then you're starting to mix in the house and you're adding effects, maybe you're adding some compressions, dynamics, EQs. All of those are preset up by your gain structure. Without a proper gain structure, you're going to end up making those mistakes in mixing all the way down the line. So it's important that when we go into setting up a gain structure, we do it right. Now, there are many different methods and ways that people describe how gain structure should be done. Some would tell you, oh, you want to set it as close to zero as possible. Or some would actually tell you that, hey, you want to make sure you're giving so much gain into your mixer, that way you have plenty to work with. Well, I'm going to set you up with some tips, and then I'm going to show you what a proper gain structure would look like for, say, a live environment and even a live stream environment. So let's get started. So proper gain structure starts with a couple of things. A, you want to make sure that you have your microphones plugged in, your instruments are plugged in, and you also want to make sure that those instruments are up. I like to set all of my instruments to 3/4 of whatever their natural volume would be. Natural volume would mean if they have a volume knob on the guitar, or maybe your guitarist, like your electric guitarist, has a gain pedal or some sort of like emulating pedal like a Helix, that their volume knob is turned 3/4 of the way up. Sometimes they're actually done with a pedal, its actual pedal itself. If you have a keyboard, for example, that is running into, say, a computer that's using MainStage or some sort of emulation software, you want to make sure that that volume is set to 3/4 of the total volume that it could output. The reason for that is specifically for instruments is that we need to make sure we have enough headroom in order to grow or decrease that volume as it comes in, that signal, that gain as it comes in. So setting it at 3/4 will help you make sure that you've got the proper setup coming from the instrument itself. Now, vocals are a little bit more different. A lot of vocal mics will have some sort of attenuation knob, a gain knob. They'll actually be able to add or subtract specific amounts of gain. Usually there are 3 or 10 dB differences. I like to set mine at minus 10 dB and make sure that I have the microphone placement proper. So here's a free tip for you. Making sure that you have proper placement of a microphone is really key here, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to pick up everything or it'll be muffled. So proper placement would mean that you're about an inch away from the mouth. You're not fully on the mouth with the microphone. You're about an inch away from the mouth. That way it picks up everything and it's nice and full and around. Well, a lot of microphones have different ways that they set that up, but making sure it's about an inch away is good. All right, let's talk about gain and volume inside the console. Let's get a gain structure set up. So right now, I'm running an X32 compact mixing console. This is a digital console made by Behringer. If you don't know me by now or never seen me do stuff like this is my favorite console. I love this console. I am also running a MacBook Air running a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, and I'm running Logic Pro X, and I'm actually putting out from Logic virtually into the console through the USB port an actual band. So I actually have a multi-track that I've downloaded and I use quite frequently for teaching on how to do this mixing portions. And so we're pushing all of that into the console here to give you a nice glimpse as to what everything is going to happen and how we're going to learn to mix everything and set everything up, okay? So in the gain structural world, there are 2 things we want to check. 1, we want to make sure, again, the volume on the instrument or the microphone is set properly. But 2, we also want to make sure that we're getting the right gain inside of our console. So let's go into one of our channels here, and let's take a look at our gain structure and make sure that we're all copacetic with everything that's going on. Okay, so here we're going to look at, specifically we're going to look at this volume vocal channel right here. And many of the consoles you have to select the channel, so we're going to select the channel. And we're going to take a look directly in this. So we're going to go here to Home, and I'm going to go over to Configuration. And what you can see right now is that the audio is coming in, it's bouncing in on this audio meter, okay? This audio meter is a really good reference point for you to make sure that you're getting proper gain in. Now, with analog consoles, you really want to be as close to minus 12, minus 10, minus 8 as you can get, okay? With a digital console, you're looking anywhere between minus 15 and minus 12. Sometimes minus 18 will work as well. And I like to make sure that I have plenty of volume coming in. So on this particular setup right now, what you'll see is that we got our vocalist and they're singing, but they're not quite loud enough, right? We're not getting enough gain. So we're not getting enough signal in to make sure that we can begin to mix properly and set up proper balance. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust this. Now, so a lot of times on a lot of mixing consoles, this says trim, and here it does because we're actually putting it in USB, but this will actually say gain on your console when you have a direct signal input. And these will say differently. This will be differently across the board when you look at it. So for example, if we look here, we'll look at this console. This is an analog console. This is again a Behringer Xenix 502. It's a little small mixing console. And so right here is a little gain knob, and this is what would control the amount of signal coming into the console itself. And so that's important to recognize. Typically, when you look at this at gain structuring, especially at consoles, you're going to see gain or trim is always at the top of the mixing console. Right here on my X32, it's actually this area right here. It's actually labeled gain. In the configuration software, it's labeled trim, and that's because we're coming in digitally, okay? Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and adjust this gain structure for this particular channel. So when we do it, we're going to go here to the trim, and we're just going to adjust it. We're going to turn it up until we get it right around that minus 18 mark, which should be right about there. And this is going to consistently hit that every single time. If you're going in between minus 18 and minus 12, that's fine. Some people have soft-spoken voices. Some instruments are a little bit lower on the gain attenuation than others, and that's perfectly acceptable. So we want to get it right to about that minus 18 mark. If you need a little more, put a little more in. If you need a little less, put a little less in. Always with my microphones, I always make sure that I have a low pass filter or a low cut. So that's right here. So we're just going to add a low cut filter. All that does is takes the bottom frequencies out. Most vocalists can't sing below a 200 hertz in the sub frequencies. So don't worry about that. And so we're just going to put that low cut on. I like to make sure, again, the gain volume is structured out properly on our instruments. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the volume to 0. Okay, you might be hearing that now in our mix.
Best day. Worst day.
Okay, and so by this, we're just going to continue to make adjustments until we're right at around that minus 18, minus 12 marking, so that way we know that our vocalist has got plenty of volume coming in. Okay, we can now go ahead and set this to plus 5 and make sure that we have plenty of headroom coming in. Headroom is that space in between, so if she were to sing higher, we would actually get that marking go higher, okay, and you wouldn't hear any clipping or distortion. And so we're set there, and I'm going to go ahead and make this just a little bit more. There we go. So now we have this mix coming in on her vocal, and we're going to do that for every single microphone and instrument input that we have between -18 and -12, okay? Now, once you've got it all set, you can then bring that fader back to 0, and then you can then take a listen to see if there's any clipping or distortion. By setting up these gain structures properly for each instrument and microphone across the board, you're setting yourself up for success when it comes down the line to making sure all the processing from your console is going out to wherever you're going to send it, whether it be a live audience or that be into a live stream mix, such as our mix buses and our aux sends. So again, I just want to make sure that you have a good idea how this works and how everything is functioning properly within a gain structure. Gain input is input level, okay? That's the amount of signal coming in. So I want you to think microphones, I want you to think instruments, I want you to think anything that's coming into the console, all right? And that controls tone, it controls processing, it controls EQs, okay? And it handles everything down the line. Volume is output. That's everything you're sending somewhere else. Think speakers, think monitors, live streams, etc. That's everything that's going out of your console, and that controls loudness. Okay? Well, I hope you learned a little bit something about audio structuring with gain and volume today. If you have any questions, please submit them in the comments below. We'll be more than happy to answer. And again, thanks for watching.